Hey, Bobby here, and I got something special for you today. John, Sinn, and I have recorded a series of short videos all about making your conversations with girls better. We're also going to talk about the right way to let a girl know you're sexually interested in her during an interaction. Now, before we get into today's video, I want to tell you about a very special masterclass that John and I will be putting on this Thursday night. We're going to be walking you through 4 steps to bionic verbal game. 4 steps to consistently create conversations that connect, that attract, and escalate towards sex without running out of things to say, without reverting to the same old boring questions, or without getting stuck in that platonic level. We're going to be teaching stuff that we've never publicly taught before, so you don't want to miss this masterclass. I promise you, the blueprint John and I are going to lay out for you in this masterclass will blow your mind. It's completely free. However, registration is limited, so make sure you register now. There's a link below. As we only have space for 500 guys on this webinar, and as you know, I got 189,000 guys on my email list. So register now. You're not going to want to miss this masterclass. And then watch the video we have for you today. It's a good primer to watch before Thursday's training. So today's video, like I said, it focuses on some of the ways to make sure your conversations are more interesting, filled with personality, and more engaging. So let's get into today's video.
I always say that, like, when you're having a conversation with a girl, she should be laughing, saying, "That's interesting," or "I never thought about things like that," or saying, "Oh, that's cute." Like, if you're not getting one of those 3 reactions pretty consistently in a conversation, you definitely are at risk of being boring.
Yeah, I think a lot. I mean, I know for myself anyway, because I struggled with conversations a lot initially. I mean, it was my Achilles heel. And for me, it was like, I would know she was bored because I was fucking bored. Like I was talking and I'm like saying shit going like, I'm at a bar. I should be having fun. I should be laughing. I should be joking. And I'm sitting here talking about like what I majored in college and like, well, it's just having this ridiculous conversation going, why am I talking about? I wouldn't be having this conversation with my friends. When I'm with my friends, I'm laughing. It's flowing, and here I am like having this just like boring interview style, or just you use the word polite, like where girls are polite. But I think sometimes mistakes is guys are too polite, and they think they have to be polite, and politeness comes across as boring. One of the things that I learned, and I'm sure this is something that I got from you, or I don't even know where I picked it up, was the earlier in a conversation you can make some sort of like impudent, like shameless type comment, it sort of snaps her into like the moment where she's like, "What, did he just say that?" And it's like kind of gets her attention, and you're not just that guy who's like, "Hey, do you come here often? So what do you do for fun? Who are you here with?" Where she kind of starts zoning you out because she's had that conversation probably 3 or 4 times already that night and countless times that week or that month. So, I think that's a good way to look at it, is if you're bored, she's probably bored.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing to kind of keep in mind is the idea of kind of like an emotional like heart rate for your conversation. Like, there should be spikes of emotion. Like, if you're just kind of flatlining and it's just kind of going straight and there's not those spikes or those peaks, and like you said, saying something impudent, saying something that's kind of outrageous, saying something to make her argue. One thing I like to do with girls is sometimes I'll just make a blatantly stupid argument just to kind of get them to argue, because when you get her to argue, she's engaging and now she's emotionally invested in the conversation. So it's better that she's like annoyed with you or that you're frustrating her than for you to just kind of bore the girl. That's kind of one thing I think of a lot, is you need to make that emotional reaction. Maybe we'll talk about that later in this session or in another session, but you really need to get an emotional impact and emotional reaction really quickly. Like, first you need to get a girl's attention, and then once you have her attention, you really need to get an emotional reaction, and that could be laughing, it could be being sad for a second because you said something that was kind of sad. It could be being frustrated from being teased, but you need to get an emotional reaction, because in most of these situations, you kind of created the situation, right? If you're on a date with a girl, you asked her to go on the date with you. If you approached a girl, you approached her. So it's kind of important that you understand that the burden of keeping the conversation interesting is just always on the man. And some guys get kind of upset about that. They're like, well, why? That's not fair. And like, they want equality. They should keep the conversation interesting. It's just the way it works. There's no point in being upset about it. If you're a guy and you're looking to date women, then the burden of being interesting is on you. It's up to them to kind of decide whether or not they like you and whether they find what you think interesting is interesting. But the burden of keeping the conversation fun and interesting is always on you. You can't rely on the woman to do it. And that's a big thing that a lot of guys do, is they kind of expect the girl to do a lot of work, and they're not used to that. Like, guys have been kind of having to be better conversationalists evolutionarily for years. That's one of the reasons you see more male comedians. Like, I'm not here to say men are funnier than women or anything, but I think you see that, like, the things that display personality, musicians, men tend to do them more because they were trying to get laid. So that's kind of where the burden to kind of keep it interesting and attractive comes from. Sure. Yeah. I think a big thing about that is just having opinions. I think for most people, they've kind of been taught their whole life, and they've been socialized that you don't want to have a strong opinion because you kind of just want to go along to get along. You know, like if you go to most parties, most people just kind of, everything's good. There's kind of like this unwritten social code that we're all going to agree that everything's cool. And nothing's really especially great and nothing's really especially bad, except like, you know, universally accepted topics, right? Like everyone loves puppies and kids and everyone hates child molesters, right? But outside of those kind of extremes, I think for the most part, people are socialized to kind of just agree and get along. And that makes you really boring. So I think the first step to it is having opinions on things.
Yeah, I want to jump in and talk about that idea of displaying your opinion, because that was like a big insight for me a few years back, because I'm like the typical person of it. With me, it was never like I was trying to be polite. I just wasn't the kind of person who developed strong opinions about things. I just didn't, I didn't care, like whatever, like a fucking Republican, Democrat, I don't give a shit, it doesn't matter. And what I realized a few years back was that having an opinion displays certainty. And people are drawn to certainty because most people, they don't know what the fuck's going on. So when somebody acts like they know it, people want to follow it. And you could look at somebody like Rush Limbaugh, who's got like this huge following because he just seems so certain about what he says.
Look at Donald Trump. He's like riding certainty to a presidential nomination. I mean, like, yeah, I think, and people, when they don't have an opinion, if it's, I do this all the time. Like, this was a big turning point for me, was I would realize sometimes my opinions would be fully formed by like what a talk radio show host said, or like I feel like now half of my opinions are like what Bomani Jones from ESPN says, So like, that happens when someone says something with certainty. If it sounds plausible or if it sounds right, doesn't like hit anything in your mind that's like, oh, that's wrong, you automatically assume that person's right. Like, you're just like, oh, they must know what they're talking about. And that makes you an authority. It makes you seem more confident. It makes you seem more secure, more like manly, strength, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, people are attracted to that. It's because people, like I said, people are confused. People don't really have strong opinions themselves. So when they meet somebody that does, it definitely draws them in. And on top of that, what you said earlier about creating that emotion, that used to blow my mind when I would be out. I had this friend who was just amazing with girls. And I used to I was bitter back then. Like I used to want to see him not like crash and burn,
Yeah.
And he'd be like talking to some girl at a bar and she'd be like fucking yelling at him. And I'd be like kind of like secretly happy that I was like, yeah, this girl doesn't like him. Cool. Finally, maybe like at the end of the night I can get her because he's going to piss her off so much. And by the end of the night, he'd be like in the fucking bathroom fingering her and shit. And I'd be sitting there going, what the hell? And then years later, I realized that, just any sort of emotion creates engagement. Anger, think about, the way I explain it is like, if I'm driving and some asshole cuts me off, I spend the next 20 minutes just having an imaginary conversation with that person in my head, and it's like, you can't get away from it. And emotions are addicting. And like you said, your friend who didn't have the skill that's the big thing, right? And this is what we're going to be teaching and talking about is that skill. It's not just about going out and making girls angry. But if you can go out and get a girl angry or get a girl really curious or really intrigued about something, you now have her attention fully, which most people can never get. So I think that's something really, really crucial is whatever that emotion is.
another interesting point about this is a lot of other techniques, if it's obvious what you're trying to do, they don't work. But you can obviously like emotionally troll a woman and it will still work. Like girls know I'm doing it to them. Like half the time when I do this to girls, they're like, "You're just doing this to make me mad," but it still works. Like they literally know I'm doing it, but the fact that you just don't stop doing it, like, and you keep trolling them, it works. Like they can't help it. It's like an itch you can't scratch. Like once that emotion gets engaged, it's just like, yeah, it's like they just have to engage with it. So it's a fascinating part of human psychology. But yeah, like you're better off making a woman mad than like having the nice like, "Oh, where are you from? Where'd you go to school? Like, where do you go? Oh, where do you like to go out? Oh, that's so nice." Like,
and that's a lot of fun, man. Like some of the best like times I had was with girls where like I would just say shit, like half the shit that was coming out of my mouth, I was just like, "What the fuck?" And they'd be like so fucking angry, you know. And I would just know, like later on, I'd be fooling around with them and shit, and it doesn't matter. And you can have more fun when you're like expressing opinion, especially if it's something you actually care about, and you know, you actually do have an opinion. And
let's move on to our last big mistake, though, which is not indicating enough interest in women. This is actually one that you brought up to me because I totally wasn't thinking about it. But a lot of guys have nice guy conversations with women, and they don't actually let the girl know they're interested in a romantic or sexual way. And this is a problem because you might actually be missing out on women who you're currently talking to, whether it's like on dates or, you know, at work or at a networking event, who are interested in you, but they just don't know you're interested in them in a romantic or sexual way. So you have to make sure that the girl knows that you're not just interested in talking to her. You're not just like having a shopping buddy. You're not just like being social, but you're actually interested in her as like a man is interested in a woman. So a couple of ways I like to work on that are, one, statements of intent. Statements of intent are pretty straightforward. They're a bad name, SOIs, as they're sometimes abbreviated. They're literally just statements of intent. They're letting the girl know what your intention is for the interaction. So, for example, if I start talking to a girl at like a network, anywhere that's like not a strictly like bar or club where I might just be hitting on her, I'm always going to say something like, "Oh my God, I'm totally going to start hitting on you if you don't stop being cute." Right? Now the girl knows, like, this is not just some dude talking to me in the produce aisle or like some guy talking to me at a networking event who's going to like hand me a card. This guy is hitting on me. It sets the kind of tone, you know? Another really good thing is compliments. Complimenting a woman on her beauty. Like a lot of guys, a lot of times if you're first starting, they say like, don't tell a woman she's pretty or hot or attractive or this, that, or the other. And, you know, in the beginning, you don't want to lead with it. It's not a great thing to lead with, but once you're in a conversation with a girl, letting a woman know you find her attractive. Like I tell women they have pretty eyes all the time. They have nice lips. They're really sexy, and all those things, they set a tone. They let the woman know, okay, like this is what the guy is interested in, not just kind of a bland, boring conversation or just being friendly. And lastly, I like to use what I call sexual push-pull. So if I give a woman a compliment, let's say I say, you know, like a girl's really sexy, then I can push her away at the same time. I can go, "Oh my God, you're really sexy. I can't even talk to you anymore." And I can like turn away from her for a second and like she's going to re-engage. And now she knows that I'm interested, but I'm also not all over her. Like you don't want to be the guy who's like, "You're sexy," and like licking his lips and like, you know, like kind of just being overly creepy. But when you use compliments, especially more sexual ones, like I tell women they have nice asses all the time. Like I'll say something like, "Oh wow, you've totally been doing squats, huh?" And I'll be like, "Here, like turn around, don't let me see that." Like that's bad news, right? But you can go pretty sexual if you then push away afterwards, because the idea is to get it on the table. You don't need. It's not like you're gonna say like, "Oh my God, I want to fuck you," and the girl's gonna like jump and be like, "Okay, right now, let's go." Or like you say like, "Oh, you have a great ass," and she's like, "Okay, well, let's go." But it's getting that idea on the table and getting her to passively accept it, right? The whole idea is passive acceptance of sexuality. You don't need to go out like I think guys think like I'm out here like being like, "Oh my God, I totally like do this. All right, bend you over." And the girl's just like, "Oh, bend me over." Like they laugh and they giggle and we move on. It's not a talking point, but it's establishing a frame. It's establishing the idea that there is a sexual dialogue, that I'm expecting sex, and that like I am interested in her. And it's setting the frame for escalation, and it's allowing me to move things forward without it being weird because now she's expecting it, right? We've all had that situation where you like try to kiss a girl out of the blue and she's like, "What are you doing?" That never happens to me anymore because I build up to it using this stuff. And the same thing with my students. Like if you ever have those kind of issues, it's because you haven't put the issue directly on the table.
Greatest thing about it is that when she senses you're that type of guy, you're the type of guy that can say kind of outlandish things and you're very flirty, you're very teasing, she lets that side of her out and she becomes more fun. Because if she's hanging out with you and she's like, oh, this guy's kind of like serious, and she kind of feels like she has to mirror that because she doesn't want to be like the sluttier one or the wilder one. She kind of mirrors where you're at. I can't tell you how many girls that when I was like meeting them, because I was in like a certain mindset, I thought that that's how they were. And then when like one night I would get drunk with them and I would let a side of myself out, and then I would see like, whoa, she's totally not the, you know, good girl next door that I thought she was, but she was just thought she had to be that way around me because that was what I was giving her.
Yeah, there's really no downside. I mean, I know guys get worried about like being a perv, but like, I mean, I've really not had that happen to me, and I don't really have a lot of stories of students once they kind of get a little experience under their belt. Like, you might mess it up. I'm sure I messed it up like a few times when I was starting, you know, but like, it's always better to be more sexual because you want the girl to make the decision that she's accepting of a dating or sexual relationship. Like, that's kind of where we want the girl to be. And like you were saying, some of these girls, like some girls are not like opposed to sleeping with you on the first date, but if you never bring up sex, then they're not gonna bring it up themselves, right? I mean, it's like I always say, like, you might as well invite the girl home at the end of every date. And I do that, and sometimes girls are like, no, I'm not gonna come up, and I'm always like, well, I had to make the offer, and they're always like, yeah, I appreciate it. Like, they're never like upset that I was trying to sleep with them, or like they're not upset that I like am attracted to them. If anything, like sometimes girls will slow you down. They'll be like, okay, like take it easy, but they're never like, it's not going to be a situation where they like storm off or they're no longer into you. You know, it's flattering. They want to hear that. Like, once a girl kind of is into you a little bit, you know, and she's interested, she wants you to be attracted to her.
Going back to what you said about guys fearing it, I think that a lot of guys have this mentality, and a lot of it was years ago when a lot of the stuff being taught was like indirect, right? And I was very caught up on this because it's very easy to being indirect makes you not get rejected.
Easier,
because
yeah.
You can like you can feel good, you can flirt, you can, and then you can walk away and go, I had a really good and I totally didn't seem needy or hungry or whatever, and she you know. But in the end, you don't really get anything. I think the key to it, and I always say this, is that a girl can know that you want to bang her, right? There's nothing wrong with a girl knowing you want to bang her. The thing you don't want her to know is that, like, this guy would be my boyfriend right now if, exactly. Like, you know, that's the problem, is that if you're giving off the vibe of, like,
you don't want her to feel like
you,
you know? Like, you want her to feel like she hasn't won you over all the way, right? Like because then you become the Instagram guy. Like, if you want to just be horrified by like terrible like beta behavior, and I don't even use like alpha beta, but there's just no other way to describe these guys on Instagram who like go to the girls' pages and are like, marry me, or like, I'm gonna send you stuff from your wish list. Did you get the stuff I sent you? Like, they're like, you're the most perfect woman ever. Like, it's like so bad, man. Yeah. Like, if you ever want to see like what thirsty dudes look like,
and if you are one of those guys who like comment on a girl's picture, you look really beautiful in this picture, it's no good will come of it. Not only do you look bad to the girl, but everybody that's reading the comments, like I'm reading the comments, John's reading, all your friends are reading.
I'll like click on your shit. I'll literally like go click on their things to see how much of a loser they are if I see comments like that. Because I literally just assume you're the biggest loser, like living in your mom's basement. Also, if you want to see like really what perverted messages look like, also in those things, you'll see things like, I want to fuck your boobs, like literally just like out of nowhere. Like, it won't even be a picture of the girl's boobs. She'll be like working out on like a treadmill and they'll be like, fuck your boobs. Like, so yeah, you'll get an idea of what that weird behavior looks like. But yeah, I mean, this whole idea of like overly like thirsty or like overly perverted, it's not a good idea. Like, playing it cool does is get in the way of you getting pussy, because like the girl's not a mind reader. She needs to know you're interested. She needs to know that, and it's flattering. And again, like, you have to do it with some subtlety. You can't just be like, I want to fuck. But when you do it the right way, and humor is big, right? Like, I always say, like, when you're starting to introduce humor, like any sort of like statement of intent or sexuality, you want to start with humor. You want it to be a joke first, because it's one of those jokes that then becomes not really a joke. Yeah. Like, it's a joke at first, but really no. So yeah, I mean, I think that's always the safest way to kind of gauge. With sexuality and interest, you're always kind of gauging, right? You're like baiting. You're throwing it out there and seeing what comes back. And if she doesn't take it, then you can just kind of move on. But if she does take it, you want to kind of escalate a little bit, reel her in a little bit, and then kind of back off again. But it's always that back and forth. It's never going to happen in like one big move. I think in general, conversations don't happen in these giant big moves that I think a lot of guys think happen. They're kind of like these small moves, and then the reaction, and then playing to her reaction.
And, that's how pickup is. But you got to know the fundamentals to be able to do that the right way. And that's what we wanted to do in this video. And we were going to be creating a couple more. And on Thursday, we're going to be doing a longer class. You guys, look out. We got another video coming. And then John and I are actually in the process of creating, we want to do a little longer course, a longer training, a free one that we're going to give out for you guys. So what I would love for you guys to do is below this, leave a comment with something you want us to cover in this longer one. We want it to kind of be a back and forth dialogue between us so that we can really get to the bottom of, listen, I know from having taught this since it's close to 10 years now, you're pretty much the same amount of time teaching this, that like conversation is one of those things that like guys always struggle with. It's just it doesn't matter how many times you try to explain it, there's always questions that come up. And I want you to leave the question that you have so that John and I can make a point to cover it in our upcoming longer class that we're going to be putting on for you guys. So any parting thoughts, John?
Awesome. Yeah, I think guys will really be into the second part of this. So we'll be back in just a couple of days with the second part.
Cool. See you guys then.
All right, I hope you enjoyed the presentation today. And just a reminder, if you haven't registered yet, make sure you register below. There's a link for the 4 Steps to Bionic Verbal Game free masterclass that John and I will be putting together for you Thursday. We're going to be going over really powerful stuff we've never taught before, all about developing verbal game that allows you to take a conversation from beginning and bring a girl to the point where she becomes attracted to you and she's willing to go home with you, give you her number, date you, become your girlfriend, all through the use of powerful conversation strategy we're going to lay out for you in Thursday's webinar. Make sure you register right now. Space is limited.